Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cerebral 21, and I have some breaking news. There has been an arrest in the Tupac Shakur murder case. Now, before I get into it, could you please hit that subscribe button? And I thank you for listening. But there has been an arrest in connection to the Tupac Shakur murder case. Now, this is big, and I'm going to explain why. But for those who don't know, the Tupac Shakur murder case has been open for 27 years, and there has been documentaries, private investigators have looked into it, movies, conspiracy theories, you name it, books, you name it. Now, for those who don't know who Tupac Shakur was, 27 years ago, Tupac Shakur was the biggest rapper in the world. He was everywhere. He was in movies. He was all over the news, good or bad. He was it. Now, on September 7th, 1996, he went to Las Vegas to watch a Mike Tyson fight. It was a Mike Tyson versus Bruce Sheldon fight. So Tupac and Suge Knight, who owned a record label that Tupac was on called Death Row. Now, Death Row was the biggest rap record label in the world at the time. They had Snoop, Dr. Dre, Tupac, I mean, you name it. So Suge Knight, Tupac, and the Death Row entourage goes to Las Vegas to watch the Bruce Sheldon fight versus Mike Tyson versus Bruce Sheldon fight. The bell rang. Mike Tyson knocked Bruce Sheldon out in 40 seconds. I mean, it was just over real quick. And they go into the lobby after the fight of the MGM Grand, and they see somebody. Now, before I set up what happens next, I have to take you back 3 months prior to the Las Vegas incident. 3 months prior, a Death Row member got into a scuffle or a fight against a guy named Orlando Anderson. Now, Orlando Anderson is a Southside Crip, and apparently he snatched a Death Row chain off this Death Row member. So fast forward to September 7th, 1996. There, Tupac and the entourage is in the lobby, and one of the guys says, "Hey, that guy is the guy who took my chain." The guy he was referring to was Orlando Anderson. So Tupac, I guess, trying to, I don't know, show his loyalty or whatever it was, that's his teammate, whatever he felt like. He goes up and he punches Orlando Anderson. And the whole entourage went in there and started punching and kicking Orlando Anderson. They jumped him. So Tupac, Suge, and the rest of the entourage left the MGM Grand, and Tupac was set to perform at Suge Knight's club 662. And en route to 662, it was Suge Knight and Tupac in a BMW, a black BMW. Suge was driving, Tupac was in the passenger seat. At a stoplight, a white Cadillac pulled alongside the black BMW and Tupac and Suge and started opening fire. And I believe they shot the car 14 times. 4 shots hit Tupac. 1 hit his lungs. And ultimately, Tupac was rushed to the hospital. I think he lived 6 days later. And on September 13th, 1996, he was pronounced dead. Now, we have to go back a little bit to set up why this happened on September 7th, 1996, and set up why Tupac Shakur is dead, or some of the reasons that why he's dead. Back in 1993 or 1994, Tupac Shakur was one of the still like he wasn't at the status he was in 1996, but he was still a big star. He already had been in a couple movies, and everybody knew him. And there was an up and coming rapper named Biggie Smalls, Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls. We all know him as Biggie Smalls or Notorious. And Tupac took Biggie Smalls under his wing and was trying to teach him the game and you know just trying to be a mentor to him. Well, Biggie Smalls at the time was signed to a record label named Bad Boy. Now, Bad Boy is owned by Sean Puffy Combs, or Diddy, or P. Diddy, or Puff Daddy, whoever, how you want to tell him, call his name, that it was owned by him. And everything was cool. Tupac would mentor Biggie, and they were friends. They were really good friends. But one night, Tupac went to Quad Studios in New York, and Biggie was already there upstairs recording, and Biggie, I guess he had some friends. They were on the balcony, and they saw Tupac coming up, and they said, "Hey, Pac, what's up, man? Like, come on up. Biggie's upstairs. Come on up, man. It's this and that." Tupac said, "Yeah, I'll be up there." But while he was on his way in the lobby, two men, because I think Tupac got 3 people with him, pulled guns on him and robbed him. And eventually Tupac didn't give up whatever they were asking for, and they shot him 5 times. Tupac eventually got helped into the elevator, went to the floor where Biggie or Diddy or Puff Daddy was, Diddy. And according to Tupac, this is not what I think happened or whatever. According to Tupac, he said he thought that on the expressions on their faces, like they saw a ghost. Like they couldn't believe he was alive. Now, a side note is Tupac at this time was going through he had a rape it wasn't rape, it was sexual assault, sexual abuse case that he was currently going into court with. And I think he had a court date like the next day or 2 days later or whatever it is. So Tupac gets shot. He goes to the hospital. And he eventually checks himself out. And that same day, he has a court appearance where he was convicted of sexual abuse and was sentenced to 3 years. So Tupac goes to jail, prison. Biggie Smalls becomes one of the biggest rappers in the world. And Tupac, now, before I say what I'm about to say, I have to tell you that the people that ended up robbing Tupac, Biggie warned him that they was not trustworthy people. Like they wasn't real, they were kind of, edgy guys, man. He didn't trust them. And he really didn't give a Pac a lot of information. He just like, be careful around those dudes, And so when Tupac's in jail, he's hearing stories like, Diddy and Biggie's boys jacked you. Or, and I'm going to say it, robbed you. So Tupac starts thinking it was a setup. And he thought that Biggie and Diddy set him up. Now, why he thought that is up to him. I don't know why he thought that. Now we're gonna get to that. He was kind of he had some points to it, because I'm about to tell you something. So he's in jail, and while he's in jail, Nobody has bond money to get him out. So Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records, puts up the money and brokers a deal, a 3-album deal, where Tupac could do 3 albums and then he could do his own thing, you know. And hey, Tupac was like, "Hey, sounds good to me. Get me out of here." So Tupac got out. But what happened was Tupac started telling everybody who shot him and who he thought was responsible. And it ended up starting an East Coast, West Coast rap beef. And it got so bad that West Coast rappers couldn't go to the East Coast, and East Coast rappers couldn't go to the West Coast. And it was Bad Boy, the company owned by Diddy, and it was Verse, Death Row Records, the company owned by Suge, and Tupac versus Biggie. And that was the big old rap war. And every time they were in the same place, it was always problems. It was always somebody pulling guns. And it's really sad because you really think that two friends like that could just sit down and say, "Hey, man, I didn't have nothing to do with that, this and that, whatever it was." But that never happened. And unfortunately, I think it ended up killing both of them. But while this is going on, it got so serious that Suge Knight ended up, I don't know how, or if they kidnapped him. I don't know how they got a hold of one of Diddy's right-hand men. You know, like this guy was a close friend of Diddy's, and they got a hold of this guy, beat him up, and forced him to drink pee. And also forced him to tell them where Diddy lived at the time. And the guy did. And to his credit, he went back and told Diddy, "Hey, man, they did this to me, and they know where you live now." And this scared Diddy, and it should have. So Diddy figured, man, I really got to get protection for me and you know, Bad Boy, whatever. So he started recruiting some street dudes, real guys, street guys that, you know, they for real. They for real. These ain't no guys you want to play with. One of those guys that always would look out for him or work security, or not, I'm gonna say security, but would have enough guy had his followers and whatever, and they looked out and, you know, was protecting Diddy. One of those guys' name was Keefe D. Now Keefe D was a Southside Crip. He was running a multi-million-dollar drug ring, so he had soldiers and people that was, you know, he was ahead of, and they would look out for Diddy every time they go to California or something like that. But it got so bad that Diddy ended up putting a $1 million bounty on either Tupac or Suge Knight. And this actually came from Keefe D. Because Keefe D was arrested for, I guess it was some drug charges or something like that. And I think he was going to end up like spending the rest of his life behind bars. But Greg Kading was at the same time investigating the Tupac murder. And he ultimately tried to broker a deal with Keefe D, saying, "Look, tell me who killed." And at this time, Biggie was dead too. And Biggie, we can go, that's a whole different other story. It's kind of connected, actually. But actually, you know, as a matter of fact, we're going to do a part 2 about this, because this is also kind of connected into what I'm about to say. But Keefe D was investigated, not Keefe D, but Greg Kading was investigating the Tupac and Biggie murders. And he found out that Keefe D might have had something to do with the Tupac murders. And this is from his confession. When he asked him about Biggie's murder, Keefe D says, we had nothing to do with that one. And so Greg Kading is like, what do you mean that? What do you mean by that one? And he starts telling the story about Tupac. Now, who is Keefe D? Well, Keefe D is the uncle of Orlando Anderson, the guy who was jumped in the MGM Grand by Tupac and the entourage. Keefe D was there with his nephew. He was in Vegas that night. And after Orlando Anderson, his nephew, got jumped, he went back to his uncle, was like, look, the death row guys just jumped me. And one, according to Keefe D, one of the dudes that knew about the bounty on Tupac and Suge Knight's head apparently was like, well, we might as well collect that bounty or try to collect the bounty. If they're here, they just jumped him. It's just the gang life. They just jumped him. Let's go collect that bounty. And that's what they did. And I guess his, I ain't gonna say credit, but Keefe D admitted that Orlando Anderson was the one who shot Tupac in the drive-by. That he handed the gun back to the guy, somebody in the car, and he didn't want to do it. So Orlando Anderson grabbed the gun and shot the car, that ended up killing Tupac. Now, why this is big is because, look, if the guy that was arrested today was Keefe D. Now, if Keefe D was an accessory to murder and was collecting a bounty that was placed on the heads of Tupac and Suge Knight, then whatever he says in prison after his arrest today could lead or be traced back to Sean Diddy Combs. And this is where this gets interesting. Because now, the first arrest, or that's not the first arrest in the Tupac case, but now we have a person arrested that could implicate not only himself, but implicate Sean Diddy Combs as the person who had Tupac Shakur murdered in 1996 in Las Vegas. That's big news, man. And I'm going to come with a part 2 because it kind of connects to the Biggie situation. That's a whole different, and I ain't going to say a whole different, it's a connection, but that is a whole different story for another time, but it connects. So, this is Cerebral 21, man, and hey, start looking it up, man. Start doing your investigations. Holla. See you later.